The moment I turned off the gravel road and saw a silver SUV parked in my private driveway, I knew something was off. I wasn't supposed to be back until Sunday. But a canceled conference and a gut feeling had me driving 3 hours early to my lake cabin in Stillwater Pines. I cut the engine and stepped out quietly. The SUV had a sticker on the back window that read Sunset Lakeside Rentals. My cabin wasn't for rent. It never had been. My name's Owen Fairley. I'm a high school history teacher in the city, and this cabin's been in my family since the 80s. I keep it low-key, off the grid, peaceful, exactly the opposite of what I was about to walk into. I unlocked the door, pushed it open, and froze. There were brochures on my kitchen counter, stacks of them. My cabin, my wood-paneled, hand-built cabin, was on the cover, with the words "Available now." "Charming rustic getaway" printed in cursive below. Then I heard her voice outside, the voice that could curdle milk. "Oh no, no pets at this one, but the lake view is just unbeatable. And it's got a new hot water heater. My brother-in-law installed it himself." I stepped onto the porch. Standing there with her phone in one hand and a clipboard in the other was none other than Amanda Alcott, the HOA vice president of Stillwater Pines. Mid-50s, stiff blonde bob, sun visor, and a voice that carried like a leaf blower at 6 a.m. "Excuse me," I said. Amanda turned so fast her sunglasses nearly flew off. Her face paled when she saw me. "Owen, you're not supposed to be back until Sunday?" "Well, surprise," I said. "Want to tell me why you're giving a tour of my property?" She clutched the clipboard to her chest like it could deflect accountability. "You weren't using it, and we had a few families looking for weekend getaways. I figured it was a shame to let it sit empty." Amanda hesitated. "The HOA board discussed it, sort of." I stepped down the stairs, trying to keep my anger from boiling over. "You broke into my cabin." "I didn't break in," she snapped. "You left the side window unlocked." My jaw clenched. "That's called trespassing." She crossed her arms. "You're being ridiculous. You haven't been up here in months. It's not like anyone was living in it. And that makes it okay to steal it." She opened her mouth, then closed it again like her brain couldn't find a spin fast enough. That's when she pulled out her phone and started dialing. "You're calling the police?" I asked, genuinely stunned. Amanda lifted her chin. "Yes, you're acting erratic and threatening. I don't feel safe." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "You're trespassing on my property, illegally renting it out, and you're calling the cops on me?" She didn't answer. The phone was already to her ear. I took out my own, already recording. "Let's see how this goes, Amanda. I hope the police enjoy hearing about your little vacation rental business." She turned away, whispering something into the phone. I stepped back up onto the porch, grabbed one of the brochures, and flipped it over. There it was, Amanda's personal number and email under contact for booking. "Wow," I muttered. "You even branded it." Amanda turned around, eyes darting between me and the driveway. "You can't prove anything?" I held up the brochure. "This says otherwise." The sirens pulled up faster than I expected. 2 deputies stepped out, hands on their belts. Amanda immediately rushed to them like a damsel in distress. "He's threatening me," she cried. "He's not supposed to be here." One of the deputies walked over to me while the other listened to Amanda's dramatic story. "I'm Deputy Harland. You the owner here?" he asked. "Sure am. Owen Fairley. Got ID, deeds, security footage, you name it." He nodded. "Mind if I take a look inside?" "Not at all," I said, stepping aside. "Might want to check the kitchen too. Pretty sure there's enough brochures in there to open a travel agency." He walked in. A minute later, he came back out, holding one of the pamphlets. Amanda had gone quiet. Deputy Harland looked at her. "Ma'am, you want to explain why your contact info is all over this," she stammered. It was just one weekend. No harm done." "Breaking and entering, unauthorized rental of private property, impersonation of ownership," he said flatly. "That's harm." Her face darkened. "You're going to want to sit tight," he added. "We're calling this in." Amanda's eyes darted around like she was looking for an escape route. I crossed my arms. "Hey, Amanda. Maybe next time you try to steal someone's cabin, Make sure they're not coming back early." Deputy Harland radioed for a supervisor while the second officer, Deputy Lanning, quietly asked Amanda to sit on the stone ledge near the cabin's fire pit. She hesitated like she might bolt, then slowly lowered herself down. Her posture was stiff, her hands clenched around that clipboard like it could still salvage her reputation. Inside the cabin, I busied myself collecting more evidence. There were papers under the couch cushions, rental agreements with forged signatures, printed schedules showing weekend bookings, and even a list of amenities that included things I didn't own. "A hot tub, please. I barely had decent Wi-Fi out here." I laid the documents out on the dining table and gestured to Deputy Harland when he stepped back inside. He looked them over without a word, his brow tightening as he scanned the names and dates. "These match what we've seen from online complaints," he finally said. "We've had a few reports about rogue short-term rentals around Stillwater Pines. Never had enough to pin it down until now." "She's been doing this to other cabins?" I asked. "Looks that way. We'll need to run the names, but I wouldn't be surprised." I stepped aside as he snapped photos. The quiet tension in the room was interrupted by the crunch of tires on the gravel road. A third cruiser pulled up, this one marked with a gold stripe. A tall woman in plain clothes stepped out, badge clipped to her belt. "Detective Miriam Connors," she said, walking up the steps. "You're Mr. Fairley?" "Yeah," I said, offering my hand. "Hope you brought a lot of folders." She gave a dry chuckle. "We've had our eye on the Stillwater Pines HOA for a while. Kickbacks, forged permits, unauthorized property usage." "You just gave us a front row seat." Amanda's voice carried from outside again. "This is all a misunderstanding. I was trying to help the community give people access to the lake, bring in some income for repairs." Detective Connors didn't even glance her way. "Let me guess, she's been claiming to act on behalf of the HOA in these rentals." "Exactly that," she nodded. "That gives us jurisdiction on fraud and misappropriation of community resources. If she used HOA funds to market or furnish the properties, she did," Deputy Harland interrupted. "We found branded material in the cabin, her name's all over it." Outside, the wind shifted slightly, carrying Amanda's voice again as she tried to plead with Deputy Lanning. "The bylaws are vague. I didn't break any real laws, it's all interpretation." Detective Connors rolled her eyes. "That's what they all say when they're caught printing revenue on someone else's deed." I led her to the back room, where I'd found an envelope of receipts tucked behind my grandfather's old tackle box. They were dated, itemized, and clearly tied to the HOA's discretionary maintenance account. One even listed a cleaning fee for a weekend Amanda herself had stayed here. Connors whistled low. "This one's bold. She didn't just rent out your place, she used HOA funds to advertise it, clean it, and profit off it." "She's been doing it for months," I said. "I just didn't know until today. Not anymore." By the time we stepped back outside, Amanda had stopped talking. Her attempted justifications had dissolved into silence, and she was now sitting with her arms crossed, lips pressed into a thin line. Detective Connors squatted in front of her. "Amanda Alcott, you're being taken into custody on charges of criminal trespass, fraud, unlawful rental of private property, and misuse of HOA funds. We'll also be issuing a warrant to search your residence and HOA office records." Amanda's eyes widened. "You can't do that." "I'm the vice president," which makes it even worse, Connors replied. "Public trust, misrepresentation of authority, and embezzlement. You're going to have a busy week." The cuffs clicked into place with a finality that made my chest loosen just a bit. Amanda didn't protest. She just stared straight ahead, like her entire scheme collapsed in a single breath. Two more cruisers arrived minutes later. One officer helped load Amanda into the back seat. The other handed Connors a folder with preliminary data from the HOA's financial portal, apparently subpoenaed weeks ago when another resident complained about phantom fees. Connors flipped it open. Well. Looks like your HOA's been charging residents for lakefront access maintenance and security patrol upgrades, neither of which exist." I raised an eyebrow. So the cameras at the front gate are fake. Worse, they're props, installed to discourage complaints. Not even wired. I laughed, but it was humorless. And this is the group that tried to fine me last year for parking my truck too close to a rhododendron, she nodded. We'll be recommending a full audit of the board. If you and the other residents are willing, a class action could follow. Count me in. As they drove Amanda away, I noticed a family of 4 walking down the road, tourists by the look of them, with a cooler and towels in hand. The father glanced at me, then at the now empty SUV, then frowned. "Is this the secluded cabin getaway from the ad?" he asked. I walked down the steps and met them halfway. "Not anymore, you've been scammed." The mother blinked. "But we paid a deposit, we have a confirmation email." "Print it out and take it to the sheriff's office." "You're not the only ones." They looked deflated. I gave them the card Detective Connors had left with me and pointed them in the right direction. After they left, I stood at the edge of the driveway and looked at the cabin. My cabin. The smell of pine and damp earth grounded me again, but now it mixed with something new: resolve. That evening I called a few neighbors. Quiet ones, mostly retirees or folks who kept their heads down to avoid friction. But as I explained what happened, something shifted in their voices. "You're kidding," said Mr. Callahan, a widower from 3 houses down. "She told me the board voted to raise fees because of shoreline erosion studies." "She said my mailbox was out of regulation size," groaned Mrs. Phelps. "Then charged me $75 for a custom one. I got a fine for leaving my porch light on overnight," said another. Story after story poured out. Gouging, intimidation, fake violations, and threats of lien filings. All traced back to Amanda and a handful of board loyalists. No one had ever pushed back until now. By the end of the night, we had a group text going. Mr. Callahan offered to host a meeting at his place. Mrs. Phelps said her niece was a paralegal. Someone else mentioned a retired judge who lived 2 streets over. It wasn't just about Amanda anymore. We were going after the whole rotten structure. And this time, we weren't asking permission. 3 days after Amanda was taken away, I found myself standing in front of a folding table in Mr. Callahan's garage, flipping through a thick binder labeled HOA operating procedures. The pages smelled like old toner and cigarette smoke. A dozen neighbors sat in lawn chairs arranged in a haphazard circle, some sipping coffee, others whispering in disbelief as the details unfolded. "I've got the original bylaws here," Callahan announced, tapping the binder with a worn fingertip. "Before Amanda's crew rewrote half of it 2 years ago." Mrs. Phelps leaned forward, adjusting her reading glasses. "Rewrote?" Her tone was sharp, like she already knew the answer but needed confirmation. "Illegally," said a man I hadn't met before. "I'm Richard. I moved in last fall. I'm a municipal code analyst for the county. Been looking into this since December." I gave him a nod. "You saw something off." I saw a lot off. The HOA filed an amendment to the CCRs without the required 75% vote. They submitted it directly to the county clerk with forged ballots. I checked the parcel IDs. Several of the yes votes came from properties that haven't had owners since 2019. A low murmur rippled around the garage. Richard continued, flipping open his laptop. "They used those fraudulent votes to pass new clauses allowing temporary community use occupancy of uninhabited properties. It's how they justified Amanda's short-term rental scheme." A woman near the back raised her hand. "I'm sorry, who actually benefits from these changes?" "Besides Amanda," Richard turned the screen to face her. "There's a shell company listed in the revised budget, Whisper Pines LLC. Registered to a P.O. box in town, but the license is under one Leonard Alcott." "Her husband?" she asked. "Former husband," I said. "They split up years ago. He was a contractor who used to do work around the neighborhood. Real piece of work." Richard nodded. "He's the one who installed that fake security gate 2 years ago. Billed the HOA $10,000 for it, even though the parts came from a farm supply store for a quarter of that." Mrs. Phelps shook her head. So we've been paying inflated dues to fund their little racket. And they've been using our signatures to do it, said Callahan, holding up a page with several forged names. This one's from my late wife. She passed 3 years ago. Silence settled over the group like a thundercloud. I stood, grabbing the edge of the table. We need to take this to the county board. If they submitted falsified documents to change public records, that's felony-level fraud. We don't just go to the board, said Richard. We go to the district attorney. That afternoon, 5 of us drove into town and met with the deputy DA, a sharp woman named Celeste Navarro. She took one look at the forged ballot packet Richard had compiled and asked us to wait while she made a call. Within 20 minutes, we were sitting in a conference room with 2 investigators, laying out everything we had: documents, screenshots of Amanda's rental listings, the HOA's altered financial statements, and the fake signatures on the CCR amendment. Navarro returned an hour later with a tight expression. We're opening a formal investigation. This isn't just one person's scheme anymore. It's systemic fraud, forged public filings, and misuse of community funds. And from what you've shown us, it looks like someone's been laundering rental income through Whisper Pines LLC. You think she pocketed the cash? Callahan asked. She and anyone else connected to that LLC will subpoena their bank records. If dues money was funneled into a private account, this moves into embezzlement territory. And the HOA board? I asked. Navarro nodded. If they knowingly signed off on any of this, they're looking at conspiracy charges. By the time we returned to Stillwater Pines that evening, word had already begun to spread. The next morning, HOA board president Carl Weatherby was nowhere to be found. His truck hadn't moved from his driveway, but no one answered when neighbors knocked. By afternoon, a sheriff's cruiser was parked out front. Detective Connors called me that evening. We've confirmed Amanda and Leonard were splitting profits. Leonard created Whisper Pines to launder the short-term rental income and kicked a share back to Amanda each month. The board president approved the maintenance contracts. Did he know? I asked. He didn't just know, she said. He signed off on a fake invoice for emergency plumbing upgrades that were never performed. Same account. Same P.O. box. The next day, a notice was posted on the HOA community board near the mailboxes. Emergency board suspension pending legal review. It was signed by the county's Property Oversight Committee. Residents gathered in clusters near the lake, whispering, pointing at the notice, shaking their heads. I stayed back watching from the dock, arms crossed as the neighborhood slowly digested the truth. That evening, Richard stopped by my cabin with a USB drive. I pulled more data from the county archives. You're not going to believe this. He plugged it into my laptop and opened a folder labeled HOA Disbursements. Inside were scanned copies of checks made out to Whisper Pines LLC, signed by Amanda and Carl. One for storm cleanup, another for property beautification initiative. There was no storm, I said, and no beautification, Richard replied. They were collecting money on jobs they never did. We submitted the files to Navarro the next morning. By the end of the week, 3 arrest warrants had been issued. Amanda, already out on bail, was picked up again outside a real estate office in town. Leonard was cuffed in a bait shop parking lot, trying to withdraw cash from a corporate account flagged by the bank. And Carl was found hiding in his boat shed, claiming he was fleeing media harassment. The headlines hit local news within hours. HOA crime ring busted in Stillwater Pines, read one. Another featured a photo of Amanda shielding her face with a manila folder as she was led into the sheriff's office. A community meeting was held in the town hall the following week. For the first time in years, the chairs were full. Navarro stood at the podium, flanked by Connors and 2 state auditors. We are launching a full forensic audit of the HOA's financial records, Navarro announced. Once completed, We will return all misappropriated funds to the residents and assist in the election of a lawful, transparent board." Applause broke out, tentative at first, then growing louder. When it quieted, a man in the back stood up. "What happens to our HOA now?" Navarro smiled. "You get to rebuild it, from the ground up, with oversight and accountability." After the meeting, neighbors approached me with thanks, with questions, and with stories of their own late fees that didn't make sense, maintenance charges that never resulted in repairs, warnings about imaginary landscaping violations. One elderly couple said their property had been threatened with foreclosure over unpaid dues they'd never been billed for. Turns out, Amanda had redirected the notices to an abandoned mailbox and filed a lien under Whisper Pines LLC after claiming the property was abandoned. "They tried to steal our home," the woman said, her voice shaking. "They won't get another chance," I told her. In the following weeks, the community transformed. The signs came down, the fake regulations were repealed, vehicles once fined for overnight presence now sat freely in driveways. The lake was quiet again, the only visitors now friends and family, not strangers who thought they were renting a luxury retreat. As for me, I finally installed real cameras, ones that actually worked. And every time I walked past the edge of my porch, I saw the marks where Amanda had once planted that plastic sign advertising my cabin as her own. I left the holes in the wood. A reminder of what happens when you let power go unchecked until someone decides to come home early. The scent of rain lingered in the pine needles, and for the first time in weeks, Stillwater Pines felt calm. But that calm was temporary. The cleanup had only just begun. I spent the next several days deep in paperwork, going through every envelope, receipt, and email Amanda had ever sent me since she joined the HOA board. What I found wasn't just petty manipulation or power games, it was a blueprint for long-term control. She hadn't just exploited individual residents. She had built an entire shadow operation behind the HOA's official structure. One of the most telling pieces came from a printed email I found in a folder marked vendor contracts that Amanda had left behind in the cabin. It wasn't addressed to any of us residents, it was sent to a law firm 2 counties over. In it, Amanda discussed how to streamline acquisition of unpaid properties through accelerated lien enforcement. That wasn't HOA language. That was foreclosure strategy. I brought it to Detective Connors the next morning. "This wasn't just about side income," I said, handing her the email. "She was trying to build a portfolio." Connors scanned it quickly, her face stone tight. "Looks like she was planning to convert properties into rental units under Whisper Pines. That would have given her leverage over the entire neighborhood, control the dues, the votes, and the land." "You think she ever succeeded?" "Hard to say yet," she said. "But your tip helped us dig into title transfers. We found 3 properties that were deeded to Whisper Pines after unpaid dues proceedings. All of them were occupied at the time owners were forced out. Illegally," Connors nodded. "We're calling it coercive displacement. Civil court will handle the restitution, but criminal charges are coming. She used a fabricated legal process to take homes." How long was this going on? Too long. She didn't need to say more. I could feel it in my bones. Later that day, I met with a resident named Timothy Harlan, a retired land surveyor who had been quietly tracking property lines and easement adjustments for years. He had a canvas bag stuffed with maps, each one marked in red ink. He laid them out across my dining table. "See this?" he said, pointing to a section near the east shore. "Amanda filed a land use petition to rezone this area as community recreation space. Thing is, that land was never owned by the HOA. It belonged to the Mack entire family. But their cabin burned down 4 years ago and they never rebuilt. Did they sell? No. They moved to Oregon, still pay taxes on it, but Amanda filed a forged quitclaim deed showing they transferred it to the HOA for $1. I stared at the map. "And the county accepted it?" Clerk never verified the signature. She submitted it during a backlog window. It was bigger than I thought. Amanda hadn't just exploited the system, she'd actively altered legal documents to seize land she didn't own. I called Navarro and brought Timothy's maps to her office. Her response was swift. "We're expanding the case," she said. "Forgery, land theft, unlawful eviction, wire fraud, all on top of the existing charges. If we corroborate this with the McIntyres, Amanda's looking at serious federal time." She tried to sell the land, not sell, lease to a private developer for a glamping resort. I blinked. "You're kidding." "Unfortunately not. We found the draft agreement." She was negotiating a 20-year lease for over $300,000. She didn't own the land. She knew that. The developer didn't. Connors and Navarro coordinated with the FBI's Real Estate Fraud Division. Within 48 hours, agents had seized Amanda's electronic devices and subpoenaed her financial records. The data showed a series of wire transfers from Whisper Pines to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, a clear attempt to shield the money. Meanwhile, the community held a special meeting. Not a vote, just people gathering, trying to regain control over their own neighborhood. I stood with Richard and Callahan near the front while residents filled the firehouse hall. "We're not just picking a new board," Richard said. "We're rewriting the rules." The crowd was tense but focused. No shouting, no rehashing of old pain, just a shared desire to move forward. A woman named Tara, who had lived there for over 20 years, stood up and offered to serve as interim secretary. A local contractor volunteered to manage maintenance directly, cutting out the inflated third-party invoices. A retired accountant offered to audit the past 5 years of dues. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. The following week, I got a call from Navarro. "We've finalized the charge sheet," she said. "Amanda's facing over a dozen counts, including criminal forgery, falsification of public documents, conspiracy to commit fraud, and illegal financial structuring." "Is she fighting it?" She tried to negotiate a plea. "Offered to return some of the funds in exchange for reduced charges." "Did you take it?" "No, we're going to trial." "And the rest of the board?" Carl pled out. "He's cooperating. Leonard's still denying involvement, but the paper trails strong." "He'll go down too." The trial date was set for late fall. In the meantime, the community moved quickly to repair the damage. We hired a lawyer, drafted a new charter, and submitted it to the county with signatures from over 70% of the residents. The old HOA was officially dissolved. In its place, we formed a neighborhood cooperative, voluntary, transparent, and legally bound to term limits. One evening, I walked down to the shore and found Callahan sitting on the end of the dock, feet dangling over the water. "Can't believe it's finally over," he said. "It's not over," I replied, "but it's ours now." He nodded slowly. "You ever think she would have gotten away with it if you hadn't come back early?" I didn't answer right away. I could still see Amanda's SUV in my mind, parked there like she belonged. Could still hear her voice on the porch trying to sell my home to strangers. "She got too comfortable," I finally said. "Thought nobody was looking." "Well," he said, standing, "she thought wrong." The trial began with local reporters packed into the county courthouse. Amanda appeared in a tailored suit, hair flat-ironed, demeanor icy. She didn't look at the gallery. She didn't look at me. But when the prosecution introduced the forged deed to the McIntyre property, she flinched. When the McIntyres themselves took the stand via video call, detailing how they'd never sold anything, never signed a deed, and had no idea their names were being used, she paled. When Richard testified about the ballot fraud and the altered CCRs, she shifted in her seat. And when Timothy unrolled his maps to show the zoning manipulation, she stopped writing notes altogether. The case wrapped in 7 days. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty, on all counts. She was sentenced to 23 years in state prison, with no eligibility for parole for at least 12. Leonard received 12 years. Carl, having cooperated fully, got 2 years of house arrest and a lifetime ban from serving on any board or fiduciary committee. The properties seized through fraud were returned to their rightful owners. Whisper Pines LLC was dissolved, its assets liquidated and distributed as restitution. Each resident affected by the scheme received compensation from the recovered funds. Stillwater Pines became a case study in abuse of HOA power, used in seminars and legal workshops across the state, and I went back to teaching full-time. Still visit the cabin every other weekend. The lake's the same, the trees haven't changed. But the neighbors nod a little more now when we pass each other. And the porch light at Amanda's old place stays off. Her house was auctioned off to pay legal fees and restitution. A young family bought it, planted flowers out front, put up wind chimes. Their little boy waved at me the first time he saw me out on the dock. I waved back. Justice didn't fix everything. But it gave us back our voice and our homes. And to think it all started because I came home early.